Up next, we have a presentation on the leadership discussion, the ICT of the future. The participants are Mr. Marc Halbfinger, CEO of PCCW Global Limited, and Mr. Kevin Vanchon, CEO of MEF.
So listen, I want to thank Tony for inviting me here for the first time. It's a great event. It's a real pleasure to be here. Just for the benefit to kind of kick things off, for those that don't know who MEF is, we're a nonprofit association, been around 15 years. We're the group that took Ethernet out of the enterprise and turned it into a carrier class technology. We focused on defining services that service providers could use to sell to enterprises, retail, wholesale, mobile backhaul. That's now an $80 billion annual, US dollar annual industry. And with a very extensive footprint of these services available throughout the world. And now we're focused on, very much in line, I think, with the theme of the event today, we're focused on building dynamic services for the digital economy and hyper-connected world. So we're very much an enabler of many of the initiatives you're hearing about today. We're a fabric that enables these initiatives to take place. Now, our connection with PCCW is we have about 130 service providers that are part of our group, and PCCW has been a great contributor. They're on our board of directors, some of Marc's people. Marc himself puts a lot of time into the MEF, providing us a lot of guidance and advice, and it's always a pleasure. And he's a really easy guy to interview, by the way. He's never has a shortage of things to say. So, Marc, good to see you.
Good to see you, Kevin. Thank you very much.
I want to start by congratulating you. I've noticed recently all sorts of announcements of awards that you've been winning. You won awards at Capacity, MEF. There was another one I can't remember. There was Africa Comms. So it sounds like things you've had a pretty good year.
So first of all, I haven't won anything, but PCCW Global, the company I represent, has won quite a bit, and I think that they've won a few things primarily around innovation, and innovation in security services, particularly around threat management services that are focused on data analytics, also around unified communications as a service being delivered as an innovative approach. And also recently at the World Communications Award, we won something that we view as coveted, which was the User's Choice Award. We didn't realize that we were in the running, but apparently that entity interviewed about 1,000 different enterprises around the world, and somehow we came up, perhaps not with the net promoter score that the gentleman from Accenture highlighted earlier, but nevertheless to be awarded the User's Choice Award we felt was rewarding. So that's basically what we're doing. PCCW Global, for those who aren't familiar, operates a global IP backbone worldwide, provides an array of connectivity services in the last 3 or 4 years focused on the application layers that are associated with that, including focusing on media, security, unified communications.
By the way, one of the awards, I think you need to talk to the AfricaCom. One of the awards was called the Network Improvement Award of the Year, which almost suggests, the network was a mess and you fixed it over the last year. So I'm not so sure, you want to keep that title. Maybe you want to do it with those guys.
But we'll take improvement too. I think that we've been hearing it this morning how networks and service providers, we keep hearing the word telco, which actually is a word that has left our jargon in Hong Kong. We don't use the word telco anymore. We're a service provider of various forms, and we focus not just on ICT, but any type of application, including smart living, that makes a consumer feel more advanced in their home, and therefore we abandoned the word telco many years ago. And in Africa, which is a challenging environment for us to operate, but where we focused upon, because of the Asia-Africa trade corridor, we felt it was important to build that out. I wasn't aware even that my team had nominated us for Best Network Improvement, but we'll take whatever we can get. Right, there's Mike, he'll tell you about it later.
So shifting to the enterprise side, you're a visionary company, you've got a global footprint. What are the major trends that are driving your business transformation?
First of all, thanks. I think that visionary first comes from our domestic environment. HKT, our parent environment in Hong Kong. I was here last year and I had the opportunity to tell the people that were here that we're offering today fiber to almost 90% of homes, and by us that means that if a customer calls our customer service infrastructure or taps click on a website in order to ask for service to provision, we'll actually have fiber provisioned into the home within 96 hours. And that's a KPI service level arrangement that we have in Hong Kong. And the amount of capacity that we can deliver over that fiber goes to as much as 10 gig to the home. And interestingly, if you're talking about trends, we published in our half-year report at the end of August that was true to June 30, 2016, that the average use of data by any single user on our network today, the average amount is 379 gigabytes. 379 gigabytes. That's 379,000 megabytes per average user per month in Hong Kong. And I think when you're willing to deliver a huge, and you can see that in our annual report. I'm happy to pass that graphic out if you want. Just go to hkt.com and you'll find it in the annual report presentation, or the half-year report this time. And we're publishing that every half year in order to show what's happening. That's an indication that if you're willing to give 10 gig to the home in fiber, if you're willing to deliver 300, 400 megabit download to the cellular network infrastructure in Hong Kong, and if you understand that video today is the primary driver of bandwidth for the consumer side, so then I think there's an indication of where things are happening. Beyond that, I think you'll want to talk to me probably about the B2B space, which I think is a fascinating environment.
Yeah, well, on that note, I think, I think you're quite familiar with the work that the MEF is doing in the industry on the B2B space,
Yeah.
and maybe you can talk a little bit about, why you think we're relevant and why you're involved.
I'll tell you why I think you're relevant, and I'll say publicly what I've been telling you privately. Is that okay?
Sure.
Our colleague from Accenture will be thrilled to hear. So first of all, I have to say that MEF and the gentleman from the ITU highlighted that there's at least 800 standards bodies out there, all delivering various technical standards. I have to say that MEF has done outstanding work, and here's the plug for you, in putting together service providers, in putting together software developers, and putting together vendors of every type into one room to have a common dialogue. And I think that's what's been missing for over 20, 25 years in the industry, is to have that common dialogue. And certainly they're building the technical infrastructure. You, particularly Kevin and Nan Chen, have led this effort in order to put together a fabric of decision making that integrates all of the stakeholders on what technology needs to look like. Open source notwithstanding, and maybe we can talk about that later, the beef I have, the concern that I have, is that the technical standards, and even this is true in all of the 800 different or perhaps more technical standards bodies that are out there, none of them are discussing what is the wholesale commercial interface that's supposed to take place among these evolving ecosystems. And so what we're seeing is companies that are able to extract huge amounts of talent, and we heard one of the speakers reference the issue of talent earlier. Those who are able to attract the volumes of talent through large budgets and huge market capitalizations, particularly out of San Francisco, they're the ones who are building independent ecosystems which are not integrating commercially downstream to get to Mr. Sultan's TTO aspiration, so to speak. And without creating the commercial wholesale interface, we're going to be challenged in organizing all of the variant different technical interfaces.
But I think we're starting to see a lot of progress in that area. I think if you look at the functionality that's being driven, in terms of building these open APIs between providers, between a provider and a cloud provider, an OTT provider, an enterprise down to the vendor, I think a lot of the commercial type functionality is being planned there finally.
Absolutely, I hope so. And as you know, we're contributing to a working group in MEF and in TM Forum, I should say, that focuses also on the commercial interfaces that need to take place at the wholesale level. Quite frankly, we've heard many speakers this morning talk about disruption, the challenges to building out organizations, things are siloed and so on. There are two areas that I think lie underneath it that perhaps senior managers should perhaps want to pay more attention to. One is to really get underneath the hood, to understand what is software infrastructure as opposed to network physical infrastructure. When you put people in a room today in what used to be called a telco, you're going to see IT people and you're going to see physical network people. And when you say the word infrastructure, the guy from the physical network is thinking about one thing. The guy from the software side is thinking about something completely different. One is thinking about databases, structured data, unstructured data. The other one's thinking about routers, switches, session border controllers, and so on. And so putting a common nomenclature together is step one. Having that in place, then getting to the common commercial dialogue around APIs, for example, will be a driver that I think will help facilitate. So I think that senior managers need to be focusing first on the different technology elements that they had previously ignored and not be afraid of something that they're unfamiliar with, to get out of what's called the comfort zone. And the second is to tackle something which is a little bit abstract, which is perhaps not as sexy, if you will, from the business, and that's the wholesale relationship in this new world. How do we interact in new ecosystems between ourselves, the service provider at the local level, and the cloud provider? Instead of just allowing the cloud provider access to our infrastructure, is there perhaps a savvier way that service providers worldwide can integrate in collaborating at the commercial wholesale infrastructure level amongst themselves and with the third-party providers? And that dialogue, I don't think, is happening in a structured forum, so to speak.
The enterprise demand for that type of collaboration, the services demand, where do you see that? And we talk a lot about the industry going from static to dynamic services, on demand, bandwidth on demand, all those things. Are you seeing that materialize?
Yeah, first of all, I think, let me cycle back again one more time to the commercial model. Enterprises themselves, like localized service providers, are all capital constrained. Not only are they capital constrained, they've become nervous about making investments in any on-prem type of infrastructure because they're worried that the depreciation levels of that investment will disappear before they've actually been able to manifest the value. And so they're looking increasingly to cloud-based models. Cloud, more importantly than the technology, is actually a financial model. It allows an enterprise, or any user for that matter, to leverage the cost on a monthly basis as opposed to capitalizing it over a long time and seeing if there's a return. And therefore, because of the economic drivers at the retail level, we're able to get to the mass at the core of companies like AWS and so on, who are able to amass a large number of people with talent, with software capabilities, who are delivering these new services, which create this cycle of development and attraction to the enterprise. And we're seeing more of that, and we've talked about big data analytics, which is true in every business today. Digital transformation is here to stay. It is, in fact, a technology revolution, no different than the printing press in the 15th century.
So I really like the TTO acronym, by the way, and I think what we're doing is probably being an enabler of service providers to be to enable TTO. Would you agree with that? Maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
I would like that to be the case, but I think that what I've heard this morning and this afternoon so far is localized relationships. How does a service provider of some sort provide their capabilities downstream to an end user? And I think that we need to entertain the larger ecosystem that we're in. Brands today who are delivering savvy applications are globalized in nature and not necessarily paying attention to localized requirements. And so an operator such as a service provider here in the UAE, as Etisalat or Do, will be focused on the United Arab Emirates. But Amazon will be looking at the global environment, or Alibaba will be looking at the global environment. How do we work together with these players, or do we view them as rivals or challengers? Is there a roadmap for global-local collaboration in this wholesale ecosystem, both of technology and skill set, or not? And I think that the verdict on that is still out.
That actually is a good lead-in to my next question. I spend quite a bit of time talking to small operators in different parts of the world. And I should have mentioned, by the way, ITU is one of our partners, and they're very much a conduit for our work being pushed into all regions of the world. But you talk to small operators, and you have all of these big things going on in the industry right now. You've got orchestration, you've got software-defined networks, there's this trends to virtualization. I mean, can these guys, can they afford it? Do they have the skill sets and the money to transform themselves? And how, will they have to? Are they going to be out of business in the wholesale front if they don't?
Yeah, I think that the localized operators eventually will find themselves either focusing on the pipe, which is perhaps what the large content cloud-based providers want them to do. And in fact, the more effort that a localized provider spends on trying to develop new applications runs the risk of diluting their focus, diluting their asset base, diluting their financial focus. Having said that, that's the way in which they're supposed to be competing in order to get value on that capitalized infrastructure to begin with. And so there's a bit of a quandary which banking analysts largely are leading to consolidation. And there was a question earlier about M&A, and I think that that's the physics of the business, that will eventually happen. But as I said, I think that there's a way to challenge that approach by dealing commercially at a globalized level. If you will, for a moment, let me hearken back to an ITU mandated approach for something that was called M1045. Those of you who are old enough to know in the business about satellite infrastructure and how it was provisioned, it was done through a technical interface that was shared by service providers that was mandated through a technical forum, but it created a commercial interface. Many years later, cellular roaming came into place with IS-41. It was a technical standard that delivered a commercial opportunity. No government body and no international organization, no standards environment is saying, here's a technical application that with it goes a commercial interface that all service providers should gather around because it will give them value. And in so doing, create also the wholesale interface to single ecosystem environments such as device manufacturers like Apple and Huawei and others, and such as cloud-based providers such as AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Aliyun in China. So these are things that I think need to be considered. And I again take a look at the interface, the juxtaposition between fast-paced evolving technology, and that's perhaps part of the challenge, is the pace of its evolution, perhaps isn't allowing operators to sit down just for a moment, take a breather and say, okay, here's all this fast-paced technology, here's going to be the platform of how we integrate together commercially in order to deliver value. And this is a point perhaps where regulators might be of value for their local operators. Instead of regulating competition at the local level, they may want to consider how to enhance environments at the globalized, localized level.
Interesting. Well, Marc, we're out of time. A pleasure as always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the advice and the insight, and we look forward to your continued leadership in the industry. Thank you.
Kevin, thanks for your time. Bye.